all of these things that we're discussing, the literacies, the events in the past months, these are not theoretical. They're not just academic. You know, like we can talk about them, we can analyze them, but they're not just theories. They're things that influence the way we see the world and the way we respond to the world. And I think that we have to remember that in our own writing. I remember that in your own writing. This semester is about raising your voice. And one of the reasons why I did that is because I believe that young people have a message that they can send to the world. When I asked you to analyze your classmates, the freshman class at SDSU, you had some insightful ideas. And I think that you have idealistic voices, voices that speak to some truth that isn't influenced by practicality, like my generation has been influenced by practicality. And it reminds me of 1968 and the civil rights protests that were largely led by students who said, enough is enough. And I want to give you an opportunity to say something meaningful. This time we're talking about literacies. Next time we're going to be talking about how we can encourage all members of the student body through tutoring to release their voices. But right now, this is where we start. And so think about your message in this essay and how you make that message matter. Now, on to those essays. As I stated, I have 2 more to read from this class. And as I'm reading, I'm seeing some things that I want to talk about today because it's time to revise, it's time to finish up. And I know some of you, you're looking at my comments and you're going, I'm not on the right track. How do I get on the right track? My grade's going to be destroyed. And I want to say, don't panic. We have time to finish up. You have time to finish up before I see your paper the next time. And I want to say there are 3 essays. Each one's worth 200 points, and there are a total of 600 points available from essays. That leaves 400 other points, and those are based on discussion boards, reflections, other short writing assignments, preliminary writing assignments. That's 400 points. And make sure you're doing them because there are more of those early in the semester than later on. In this class, I think most of you have done all of these. And so right now you're looking at your grade and going, I have more than 100%, or I have almost 100%. That might change as you get an essay, but remember, I built those 400 points in because I want you to succeed at this class. I believe that we always have more to learn about writing, and I don't want your grade to suffer because you're not at that point where I say that's an A essay. So it's possible for you to get a B and 85% on every essay, do everything else, get the extra credit points available from the additional visits to the Writing Center, and end up with an A in this course. That's how I built it in. It's that effort that you're making all along that's going to lead to your writing improving and will get you the A that you want. Your grade is more than a final project and how it measures up to the rubric. It is your full effort in this class. And I did that on purpose because I value effort and not just final projects. I guess the converse is also true. If all you do is get 100% on 3 essays, you will not pass this class. So, that might be demoralizing, but yeah, I think it's better the other way. So I do this because I believe in these foundational ideas about writing. All writers have more to learn. I have more to learn. You have more to learn. No matter how expert you were in high school, you have more to learn. I also believe that writing varies by situation and context. Remember, I told you after all of you go, oh my gosh, my rhetorical strategy paragraph is not what she's looking for. If I'd gotten a real grade, I would have gotten like a 60%. Oh no. Well, I believe that all writing varies by situation and context. I told you then, you are good writers. I've seen the way you've written on the discussion board. Situation and context, some situations and contexts, you're expert writers. And others, you have more to learn. So I'm trying to take you along that circuitous route to learning about writing. And it is very circuitous. Writing is a process and not the same process for every text or every person. Some texts you're going to start with massive brainstorming. Some texts you're going to start with a thesis. Some texts that you write, you're going to start with research. Some texts you're going to start with a problem and you're just going to expand upon that. What we're writing, who we're writing for, the way we're writing changes the process. And my process may not be your process. Writing or literacy involves aspects of identity. Who I am, my identity informs my style of writing, my grammar, the way I think, all of that. I don't have the only identity. That means that other identities may analyze differently. They may think differently. They may see things I don't see. It's all of us collectively being able to, it's all of us collectively that allow us to see the world more holistically, because none of us can do that. And writers learn from knowledgeable peers. You learn from your peers in this classroom, you learn from your peers in the Writing Center. We teach each other, and I think that this is super, super important. By the way, I've been glancing at your comments, your acknowledgement of the contributions from your peers, watching you thank them. I think that you all are doing a good job on this, and I appreciate your support for one another. So let's talk about revision. First of all, I want to say revision is different than editing. Editing focuses on surface level things, like, oh, you left a word out, or shouldn't there be a comma there? Or it's effect with an E and not affect with an A. And those kinds of things, that's editing. Revision is more, revision is harder because it requires you to reorganize, rethink, add, subtract. It takes time. And I can tell some of you are not used to this massive revision process that I gave you time for. And some of you, you're like, this essay requires you to think in different ways than you've ever thought for an essay before. And it's been really difficult for you to wrap your head around this difference. And so revision's been challenging for some of you. Also, a lot of you have never had to write for a very specific audience. And so you just write the way you write. And I'm challenging you, this is part of this class, is the context. our audience changes the way we write. You're writing to me, it's going to be different. Quite honestly, I'm surprised I haven't seen a lot of slang and maybe some profanity from your writing. Not that I love profanity, but my point is you're writing to first-year students. You need to connect with first-year students. You want to engage them. And so as you're thinking about what are you doing in the last week of this essay, think about your audience. I think that that's the most important thing. E. Shelley Reid says, writing rhetorically means adapting to your audience and your purpose. You should have a purpose, and it should be clear and well developed right now. I think for some of you, it's not quite there. It's okay. It's really okay. Think about your audience and ask yourself, is this, your essay, something that your audience, random first-year students, would want to read, that they would read the first paragraph and go, oh, I want to know more. I mean, think about that. Would they or wouldn't they? Why? And then I want you to think very specifically, how are you connecting to the values we talked about earlier in this project? By the way, because we have the slide deck, what was that, 3 weeks ago? Because we have the slide deck and you put all your information on the slide deck, we have that information, the values, the beliefs that first-year students think about. How do your examples, your narratives, your language, how are you tapping into your audience's beliefs and values and concerns? Because you want to do that. You want to think about, my audience is concerned about success. How do I show that I am also concerned about their success, that I'm struggling with success like they are, that I'm not even sure what success is? How do you do that? Remember, they're afraid for the future. They're frustrated with distance learning. I saw very few of you reference that in your papers. A sense of not belonging. I didn't see a lot of that in your papers either, as you were reflecting on your own sense of not belonging. Or desire for achievement, that uncomfortable sense of transition. Oh my gosh, it really is hard. Transition is always hard, but this is, for some of you, this is your first major transition. And some of you have changed schools many times, started new jobs. So, like you've done something like this before, but even that, then this is more major. You should be choosing your stories, your language, your strategies, and your details with this audience in mind. And that's tough. So think about that as you are going back over this, because there's still a week here. As you're doing that, you can think, by describing the way I come down the stairs and I'm smelling these smells, I'm making my readers think about those, like that. Or by comparing this thing to that thing, I'm reminding my readers that. Or by introducing this idea, I make my readers ask certain questions, and so on and so on. Think about, how is what I'm doing going to make my audience respond? And your choices have the potential to prompt readers to engage or to check out. And I know as I was reading your paper, sometimes I would be totally engaged. I just go, oh my gosh, this is really, I'm on the edge of my, there's no edge of my seat. I'm sitting at the dining room table with a laptop, but you know what I mean. And then sometimes I just go, I don't know why I'm reading this. And you've got to think about that in your head, because your rhetorical choices, your choices of examples, your choice of strategies, your choice of words, your choice of descriptions, they have power. And they have power to strengthen your message or make readers not care about your message. And your message should matter. Now, things to think about in revision. You should think about the genre that you're writing. We read examples of personal essays, Callie Linfor, and Joyous Survival, James McBride and Hip Hop Planet, Johnson and Unspeakable Conversations, Gloria Anzaldúa, and How to Tame a Wild Tongue. Think about the characteristics you see in the essays we read. And think to yourself, am I following those characteristics? That's going to be important as you finish this up. By the way, pause me at any point, ask a question. And I'm going to pause me right now. Any questions so far?
I have one.
Yeah, Derek.
I'm just a little curious about, I'm not really sure how many slides ago it was, but you're talking about some of the ways to make it more relatable to the audience. And yeah, I think it's this one right here. And I'm just wondering, because I feel like the ones that you've listed, and I know they're purely examples, but I'm wondering, because many of these seem pretty like pungent, and I don't want to call them extreme because they're not, but I feel that some of them might not relate to some of our stories, and just curious on how we would make the anecdotes and the analysis more relatable without having to go to a like such a strong point. It's hard for me to explain that, but hopefully I got my point across.
Okay, so you're writing about video games, right? Not exactly. You're writing about how you learn.
Right.
And I remember that, Derek, because the last time we talked, last Wednesday, I had just read your paper and you asked a question about obstacles. And so, because we've had the conversation, I actually remember. If you're writing about, I mean, like nothing is as dramatic as, oh gosh, Johnson's Unspeakable Conversations, and how this idea of killing newborn babies or, you know, like euthanasia, I mean, like it's super dramatic. And most of us don't have that story. Some people do, but that's not your story. And so it would be fake if you tried to, you know, like over dramatize this.
Yeah, exactly what I'm trying to convey. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and yet you can talk about your approach to learning, um, as you can talk about your frustration with distance learning, you know, like in a way that is, you know, like I logged onto Canvas for the first time and I'd never seen it before. And I think to myself, how am I gonna do this? I can't find anything except for my class, and hopefully I'll find the place to log in. I mean, like by you having this process allowed, you're appealing to others. By verbalizing that, you're appealing to others who are frustrated with distance learning because they can connect with you on that. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, I think I completely understand what you're trying to say, but I think the reason why I didn't include distance learning as a frustration of mine in the section where I talked about frustrations with learning is because although it has been frustrating, I think it's not it hasn't been more prominent as far as impact, um, because I've dealt with Canvas and things like that in classes beforehand, and now yeah, it's 100% of our curriculum. But I felt that some of the more like impactful and bold experiences that I have had as far as learning goes has been in my previous like childhood years, which is why I use those anecdotes. So I'm just curious as to why, or not why, but like how I'm able to convert that same kind of connection that we all have of distance learning to some of the more, um, I guess, obscure experiences. Because I've, at least my group mates have said, oh, like, yeah, I've played Gaga Ball or whatever, but um, like, how can I have that same connection without it being as much of an experience thing?
So, so it's part of it is your meta discourse, and meta discourse is where you are doing these things, but then writing about what you're thinking about as you're doing them. And I didn't remember that you had worked on written about Canvas, but it's the reason why I mentioned that is because it's the same process of meta discourse. Callie Linford does this when is she talks about, after she talks about the books, um, she talks about all the storytelling. She talks about how she learned all of these things, like how to eat roses and how to survive an avalanche. And then in her next section, she talks about all the storytelling. I share all these things with people so they can survive, and they share their things, their anything extra with me. And so as she analyzes the process, or she also talks about how after the story of her mother's domestic violence, she says, my mother and grandmother shared these things because they knew what I didn't know, that I was vulnerable and that these things would happen to me. And so it's that meta discourse that will allow you to connect with other people. So it's including that, and this is related to your main point, but it's also appealing to your audience's concerns, the things that they are dealing with. For in your essay, and I don't remember if you do this, is like I believe you have a desire for achievement, for overcoming the obstacles of learning, and for getting better and better. And ultimately your point is, like all of these things and these obstacles I've overcome and these ways of learning, I can now apply them to my current life, and I will be able to apply them in the future. And then your audience should be thinking about, oh, I've done this one, I've done this one. Yes, I have other things. And so you may be doing this already, Derek. I don't remember. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Or
it does. Yeah, I think especially the last 2 points that you brought up sum it up pretty well because I definitely want to invoke like, yeah, I've, had this challenge, but then I learned X and Y, and now I can use what I've learned from situation X and Y to solve future problems or even just kind of reflect on it.
yeah, and those get sprinkled throughout the essay. They're not like massive, like, and the moral of my story is at the end, kind of like those Aesop's fables. I don't know if little children still read those, but like at the end, there was always a moral of the story. And I think that by sprinkling them throughout, you don't have to have that really pedantic, like, and now I know everything, and I'm going to pass it on to you. Because you still want it to stay engaging and like make them think and not tell them exactly what to think. Yeah, it's a weird balance. And some of you are going to get that balance in this essay, and some of you will not, and yet you'll still tell an engaging essay. And I want to go back to there's always more to learn about writing. And that's a thing that I believe. And so I am not anticipating that you all will be perfect writers at the end of this essay, or that you're perfect writers when you came into the room. So, other questions about things that we've talked about? So I want you to think about this. And I talked about this a bit last week, and I want to mention it again. Do you need to use the word literacy in your papers? Well, do you need to use the word literacy to tell your readers you're thinking about literacy? Uh, Callie Linford does. McBride does not. Johnson does not. Ansel Dua does not. I'm trying to think about who else. Jessica Harris does not. And yet they are talking about literacies. And I think that that's powerful, because just the word literacy might create barriers. And so for some of you, I think that you can revise and you can build your story about a literacy and show the value of a literacy without setting it up like, what is a literacy? And I think that that would strengthen a lot of your papers. Our texts don't do this. And so think about how you might ask yourself this question. Would adding the concept, the word, to your essay strengthen your claims and help readers see your main point? Would it detract? Does it strengthen or does it detract? And I think that that will show you what you want to do. Other things to think about. What is your main point? How do all your claims connect to your main point? What claims do your stories illustrate? How does this matter to your audience? Don't just say all literacies are survival and it's important to readers because it matters. That's really circular. Instead, think, like all ways of learning and all specialized areas of knowledge have unique value in depending on somebody's circumstance. And that's why, even if they're not your literacies, you should care about and respect them in other people. Do you see how that's so specific? That's kind of Callie's point. Be specific. Know why it matters to your audience. To go back to Derek's idea, and we talked about it last time, and we've talked about it today, so it's a really easy one to go back to because you're all on the same page. He's got all these games that he's played, and every time there's a learning curve. And the learning curve, these obstacles, I assume Derek has plateaus where, like he's not getting better, but then he gets better. And ultimately it leads him to some level of success. And just the process of going through this over and over again allows him to see himself as somebody who can overcome obstacles. Why does that matter to his audience? Because all first-year students will encounter obstacles. For me, it was a poli-sci class that I only met once a week, and I skipped the week before the exam. So I didn't know it was an essay test, and I hadn't prepared for an essay test, and I got an F. That was an obstacle. I worked like a crazy person to raise my grade because there were like 3 grades the entire semester. And it was pretty extraordinary that I got a B+. I mean, like that's as good as I could do. But it was an obstacle that taught me something for other classes. all first-year students have this. And so by Derek emphasizing this, he's got a why it matters. And you should have a why it matters. For Kristen, she's talking about, like taking on so many things that eventually she crashes. And that memory for her reminds her that she needs to slow down, build in rest, and by doing that, she's more successful. Why does that matter? Because almost all college students will take on more than they possibly can do and work themselves to exhaustion at some point, and they have to be reminded to slow down. Do you see there's always a so what? And it's in telling the stories you want to get there, and you need to think about, is my story helping me get there? Revise your intro to hook your readers. All of our examples from the text we read start with a massive hook that when you read them, you just go, what? Even though you're not McBride's primary audience, then, even though you're not McBride's primary audience, at least it made you mad that he was saying rap had no music. Like it's not even music. I know, so that annoys a lot of students. It resonates with me because I think, is that, or at least the first time, or the second or the third, I thought, is that even music? Okay, I'm pausing again because I know I get on a roll and it's hard to interrupt me. Questions? Your stories. Think about what your stories are doing. Sometimes your stories are definitely building toward your main point, and I can see it. They illustrate powerful things. And other times I think to myself, this story is getting me bogged down in details I don't need to know for the main point. Anything that doesn't build toward the main point will do that. And that might mean that you have this beautiful description of something and you say to yourself, I really like that, but it's not building toward the main point. There's nothing in there that my readers need. Sometimes you'll see one thing that they need, and you'll have to figure out how to weave that in. But make sure that you know what your story is doing, the claim it's illustrating, and why it's there, what it's doing. Narratives do something. The other thing that I want to say is, whenever possible, create immediacy in the story rather than general memories. Take it to a point in time that represents other points in time, because you want to put us in that place where we can actually see what you're seeing, like through your experiences. You might say, well, I don't have a point in time, I just have the general. Then reimagine it. Like take that general memory or that partial immediate memory and then piece it together in a way that helps readers see through your eyes. That's why this is called creative nonfiction. Questions about that? Things to think about in revision, organization, paragraph length. Some of you have page-long paragraphs. This is a different type of writing, and you want to keep it moving. I know there was, I comment on some of that. Some of you are afraid of having 2-sentence paragraphs, and I'm saying, don't be afraid of it. Our authors were not, the authors we read, and when we get back into academic writing, you'll have those page-long paragraphs, but this type of writing requires something different. Think about how you're developing your ideas, think about your analysis. What do you learn? Why does this matter? You're building towards your main point. We already talked about sprinkling meta discourse, your analysis, throughout the essay, like even repetition. So it's 11:45. Final questions on revision.
I have one about when you're gonna read my essay.
Today,
No,
Tuan.
no,
Oh,
actually,
but
sorry, no, you go first.
today, Tuan, but you weren't the one asking. Are you Connor?
I'm Tuan.
Tuan, yeah, today.
Could I delay that to tomorrow, if possible?
Do you want to resubmit so that I read a different copy? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, because I have a writing center meeting at 1, and I want to go over that so then I can revise that based off of my discussion last week as well. So you can have that one to look at instead of an older copy.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking. I am very, very happy to do that. One of the things that I wanted to say, we're not going to do all of this. We'll talk about formatting on Wednesday. We will get to Teresa Tony, but I don't want to short circuit this process. And we'll get there. It's only week 6 in the semester, and we're doing fine, and you are doing fine. I really want to emphasize that. Your paper's due on Saturday. I will take it all the way through next Wednesday. And some of you are saying, I am totally going to be done on Saturday. And some of you are thinking, yeah, I might rather have a few extra days. Now, next Monday, we'll be on to Teresa Tony. We're going to talk about turning it into a book, but we won't talk about revision anymore. If you have questions on Wednesday, I'll answer those. But otherwise, we're just going to come up with book titles, how we should organize this, whether we should do a Kindle book that people can access, or like that is a real book, or if we just want an ebook as a PDF that's available only to our class. We have options. How should we organize it? Also be looking for an image that communicates your ideas. Test them out with your group. There is a discussion board. There will be an optional discussion board available this week that allows you to get final feedback from your group, share images that you could potentially use for the book copy. Test them out with your group. We need to talk about author bios, what we should include. I mean, these are things that if you're putting a book together, you have to think about those, and we have to think about them in terms of our audience and how do we connect with our audience? How do we make these ideas as a whole appealing to that audience? And that's what we're going to talk about on Wednesday. Final questions for me. It's 11:49.
Can I ask you a question about one of the email that I sent you about?
Yes. Okay. I actually emailed you back.
Yeah. I was gonna say I read your email and I thank you because it popped up, but it's still locked. So is there a way you can like unlock it so that I could like submit it?
Yes, Adrian, I'm so sorry.
No, it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened is some of you were trying to access the reflection direction questions and you were just getting coming soon. And I was so confused. A couple of you asked me about that because I got most of the responses. And so I was confused. I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand. So I will fix that, Adrian, immediately.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. And you know, like any of you who didn't turn that in, please feel free to turn it in at least by Wednesday, so that you get credit. Carlos, I love your hat. It's all I can see besides your glasses, but I do love it.
Thank
Are you sitting outside, Carlos?
No, I'm in my room.
Ah, with a hat and sunglasses. Excellent. And Kristen's got her cat. Nice, nice. Final questions. It's 11:50, so I know many of you have places to go after this. All right, I'm done. I'll stick around as long as you're here, and otherwise, have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, just like well, not in person, but over Zoom, I just wanted to say thank you again for the email